Okay, everyone. We're at the final session of the day, and I'm very pleased to introduce Jilly and delighted to have her here with us. So the final session is You Are There, Pluralizing Our Easts. And Jilly Traganou is Professor of Architecture and Urbanism at Parsons School of Design and affiliated faculty with the Department of Politics at the New School for Social Research. Her work examines urban and material questions related to social movements, identity, affect, and participation, and her current research is focusing on the role of spatial agency, material engagement, and social reproduction in prefigurative politics, such as Occupy Wall Street, Christiana, Freetown, and Standing Rock. She is co-editor-in-chief of Design and Culture. Her latest work is the anthology Design and Political Dissent, Spaces, Visuals, Materialities, published by Routledge in 2020, which was a welcome contribution to the field by many of us. And the forthcoming volume, Design and Displacement, co-edited with Sarah Lichtman, is forthcoming with Routledge also in 2023. She has also co-authored 2 monographs and guest-edited special issues in several journals. And yes, welcome, Jilly, and thanks.
Thank you so much for the presentation and for inviting me, and also to the organizing team for all the work, including this event. It's my first since the pandemic. First time I'm going to have a mask in public. So my presentation is kind of provoked by the name, the brand name of this campus, the Here Is, which in some way gives me the impression that this is made by people who are neither here nor from the East, and even maybe addressed to people who are not here or from the East. And the purpose is to pluralize our East, in some way to think about where we are. So actually there are 3 aims here. One is to ground us back to the site where we are, a bit from our conversations, even to the AI, going down to the earth where we're here today. And for me, this is primarily an Olympic site, because that's how I learned and discovered this place when I first came in 2009, while I was doing my research on the Olympics and the role of design in it, in the Olympic and the anti-Olympic movements. But at the same time, it is, maybe to use a word that we used earlier today, it is a kind of uneven playing field, unavoidably, and there are always some criteria that we can use to assess the site that were not present when the site was created by the Olympic organizers or the legacy committees. And the second aim is to create a kind of a polyphonic assemblage of the different conflictual narratives about the site or the space from the different stakeholders or constituents, many of which are not present, probably or not represented in this room. And the third is in some way to bring up some of the conversations we had yesterday with the PhD students to create, to insert my own positionality coming to the site or thinking about the site. And not so much my analytical research, but maybe what I have learned and also how I feel about the site, considering both my difference and my complacency, thinking about my own intersectional identity, being on the one hand an Olympic studies scholar or a design studies scholar, but at the same time somebody coming from Greece and having kind of unavoidably a very uncomfortable relation with this Olympic site in its post-Olympic era. And some of these kind of narratives will come from text, and some will come from images, and some of these images would agree with what we hear, and some of these images might have some kind of dissonance with what we will see, with what we will hear. And I would like to thank very much Zerika and Thomas and Robert for helping me create this kind of polyphonic narratives or assemblage today. So they will participate in the presentation. And here are just 9 segments which convey some of these narratives. One of the technical challenges we have, this might be going on its own. Especially one of them I want to point out, the one by Ian Sinclair, the Unofficial Countryside. Ian Sinclair is an author and a filmmaker, and he has written a book called Ghost Milk, some of you might be familiar with. It is about this particular area because when he was young in the 1970s, before he became an author, He was a kind of a dropout, and he worked as a kind of temporary laborer in a site here called Chobham Farm. Some of you might know or might remember from this period. And so one of the experts, one of the segments are coming from his narrative of this area from the 1970s. And some other excerpts come from websites which are clips of how the Here East and the Chobham Manor now, which is a kind of residential development in the area, are being self-presented in their websites. So there are clips from these other voices. And there are some other clips coming from newspapers which interview people who come from the area, especially the Newham area, residents who have been affected somehow by the Olympics. And they felt betrayed by the Olympic promise. And so to begin, so we haven't rehearsed that much, so we might have some technical challenges, but I hope we will manage. And first it's my second. "10 years after the Games, and London can sit back with a sigh of relief. Mission accomplished, kind of. It depends, of course, on how you choose to look at it. Close one eye, move a bit, put a curtain there, add a grove of trees on the other side, and here you have a splendid picture. No white elephants, no deserted venues, no emptiness, an inhabited Olympic village, a beautifully maintained park named in the honor of the Queen." I remember a time when London's Olympic anxiety was all synonymous with Greece. After its post-Olympic failure, Athens was demonized as the anti-model of all future Olympics. London was determined to do everything unlike Athens. It was a rhetorical promise, of course, because how would it ever be possible that cool Britannia, with its Beatles and its Rolling Stones, its A&S and its state galleries, would fail as brutally as provincial Greece at the other end of Europe? Needless to say that this creates an uncanny context for a Greek like me when visiting the Here East. As an Olympic skeptic, coming from the anti-model, tired of the what if, today I will try to sprinkle some grease on the post-Olympic part. Looking backwards, looking laterally, looking towards the Stratford shopping centre, a world apart from this new neighbourhood. Looking to the Here East from the south, from the other east. Thinking of my own easts, the paradigm was established in my favor. In the early 1990s, I had it easy in the Far East. A white girl to be invited to kids' baseball games, to be shown with pride to the host family's friends, to be touched by rural children on Korean islands, an amusing otherness, concealing centuries of privilege, but not for too long.
After the bus had crossed the border, you felt it was a good idea to state your support. You're angered, you said, with how the border patrol treated me, someone like me. And this is not how you saw me. As I was discovering that there are some like me, and I'm unlike some others. Soon I learned that someone like me is stopped at the border and searched. No reason stated. I heard the divide, of course, but now it became experiential learning, crossing through my body, as it were. Your words verified the stunning revelation. I don't know if I thank you enough for reinforcing the lesson, or else I would continue to think I was a random selection. I don't know if I thank you for placing me in a place of being not you, or else I would continue to think of borderless continents and placeless identities as the world in which we both live. I don't know if I should thank you for bringing into light that fleeting mirror, the blade that separates you from me.
Disconnect and disorientation is what I felt when I visited the site for the first time in the fall of 2009. I was guided through a former wasteland or a rather forgotten land, ripe for narratives of progress and remediation. Then came the cacophony of punksters mourning in despair. Clay's Lane was a legendary estate, dear to some Londoners, unknown to most, now a quilt of memories at the library archive. The demolition marked the end of an era. Clay's Lane, the last bastion of black sheep cooperativism, now deposited in archival boxes at the Bishopsgate Institute. It gave way to the Olympic Park. Other past inhabitants of the site were the travelers, now also forced to serial displacement. The Gardeners, too, have become a nostalgic photographic series in the archives of Getty Images. Indignation at Maynard Gardens. The planning of the London Olympics is causing major uproar and upset at the Hackney Week. Gardeners to be evicted to make way for Olympic Village. On April 11, 2007, Tommy Norris stands outside his set on his boat on the Maynard Garden allotments at the heart of the Olympic site. Tommy has had an allotment on the site since 1947, growing vegetables for 60 years. Tommy and Aileen Dolan work on their plot in the garden allotments. The couple has had an allotment on the site since 1989, growing vegetables for 18 years. Tommy Dolan takes a break from working on his plot. Maynard Gardens bequeathed 100 years ago to be allotments in perpetuity by the original owner, Major Villiers. They sat in the proposed north-central section of the Olympic Park and were removed to make a footpath to the stadium. The punks, the travelers, the gardeners all gave way to a new society of creatives and innovators.
Today we gather here at Here East, a multi-award-winning project for design, ecosystem growth, social impact and sustainability. Here East is a catalyst for growth. Located at the heart of Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in London, it is a launchpad for innovation. Once the former broadcast centre for the London Olympics, it has been transformed into a thriving technology-driven community and is the most successful post-Olympic regeneration project in the world. Here East has achieved significant social impact and continues to play a key role in driving strong economic growth in rapidly growing East London. Nearby the Here East is Choble Manor, a housing development. Self-advertised as one of London's most sought-after addresses, it offers an extensive selection of 1 to 5 bedroom homes. From the day you move in, you'll love the fact that everything in your new home is clean and untouched. As soon as you unpack, you can enjoy your dream home. Yet, instead of being the diverse community that Ken Livingstone promised, a model of social inclusion, we're getting the exact reverse, said Mr. Sharman, a resident in the area. It's gentrification, says Rudy Smith, who spent much of her life in Newham. She and her 3-year-old son are among the 33,000 households on the council's housing list. It's a facade, she added. It is devastating to see so many of my parishioners living in overcrowded conditions or being forced out of the borough, while new houses are being built all around them, said Father Sean Connolly, a local priest with a large congregation of people experiencing housing challenges. It's the most extreme housing misery you can imagine. People living in damp, miserable accommodation with a lack of light, or children moving multiple times, said Dr. Penny Bernstock, a housing expert at UCL. We've built mainly market housing in an area of acute housing need. This is particularly problematic given that addressing deprivation, especially housing deprivation, was a key dimension of London's bid.
In the 1970s, for Ian Sinclair, this very area was a wildflower park of Labour history and social stagnation, an unofficial countryside, this patch of East London. Ian Sinclair was a labourer at Chopping Farm, which he describes in the following words. We come off the road, through the gate across the mud into the farm, a progression of clapped-out warehouses against the fence and the spread of Stratford rail yards. The reality of the farm was very soon apparent. We were a disposable element at the bottom of the food chain in a speculative operation that might collapse at any moment, and whose legacy would be strikes, picket lines, low wages, aggravation. We were unloading containers and loading lorries, slippery, brown paper, sacks of talcum powder. Yet, every day, we explored another thicket on the marshes, another back river. When we climbed the mounds to kick a ball, we looked out over a classic edgeland of inconvenient, dirty, fly-by-night enterprises and aborted pastoral relics. A river shared by oarsmen, narrowboat dwellers, dog walkers, wanderers, who were not filmed, not challenged by security, trusted to make their own mistakes. Now the Lee would be an engine for regeneration. Proposals were floated for seafront promenades, tree-lined and pub cafes and restaurants from which to delight in the passage of regular water buses with gay awnings. There will be pleasure gardens, cinemas, dance halls, boating lakes, bike tracks. In boroughs affected by this madness, long-established businesses closed down, travellers were expelled, and allotment holders turned out of their gardens. Most of the development will be buy-to-let investments. The Hackney solicitor, Harry Davis, said, huge amounts of Russian and Saudi money. Tenants will move in and out constantly. There will be no community at all. Is there anything you'd like explained?
In its pre-Olympic era, the park had already made many internal enemies. Angry youth pointing their fingers, as well as adversaries pushing gently, squeezing their futures within the cracks that the fence created at the site's boundaries. The last pre-Olympic months were as expected: barbed wire, enclosures, and total surveillance, extreme militarization across the country, a nation on alert. Yet the surrounding city was anticipating the event with festivity. Cool Britannia everywhere merged with the Olympic emblem. Feel and look all over the city and beyond. There were times that I was dismayed by the British, who seemed blinded by their nationalist euphoria. But I had been there myself, and I should have remembered. I had a change of heart when I saw the other side of the park. It happened during my second visit while having a beer by the canal in a newly blooming land of hipsters. How do governments like them more than the punks, I thought. An engine of regeneration, volunteerism, drone flying, joggers by the council estates heading to the park. But who can say no to a beer at the end of a field research day? Together with my fellow academics, I enjoyed the relaxing sunset by the canal, a canal that reminded me of the one in my own neighborhood, the Gowanus, a similarly gentrified canal near Park Slope, Brooklyn, which I called home. I had been there before, many times enjoying the lavender lake, toxicity leaving a purplish intoxicating hue in waters and skies. Multiple times embarrassed by my national pride, now the carrier of the omen. But here I am at the Here East in the post-Olympic era, a conveyor of the new that was granted an honorable entry into the site. Preparing for my return, I was afraid I would like it. The former wasteland, now a knowledge industry park, 30 minutes only from King's Cross, another site of the formerly accursed. Preparing for my return, I was afraid of oblivion. Clay Slane, the travelers, the multi-ethnic residents of the surrounding area, would they be recognized or placed behind smoke screens? Would there be any cracks in the pavement to remind us of the erased pasts? Preparing for my return, I was afraid of familiarity. Students, faculty, and runners crossing through this formerly industrial site, brought into surreal normality as if in an exceptional economic zone. Preparing for my return, I was afraid I would find myself on an island, swallowed by the Westfield Stratford city, without having to cross the rough edges, missing the chasm between the easts. Did you have the chance to look at the site? If you climb up one of the new buildings, you can have a splendid historical vista of the park. It's easy to marvel at this well-behaving environment. New birds chirping, a nice breeze, no more toxic odors, a desirable environment for raising kids, for synergizing with those like you, for living in the bubble. Or did you listen to your podcast on your way to school? Another effective way to filter out the reality, a formula for my alienation. After all, it was not your fault. When I met you at the RCA in 2012, you wanted to know nothing about the London Olympics. You were offended, you said, by their existence in the city you called home. Hands washed. And now we're all part of it, beneficiaries of their legacy, incarnating the post-Olympic dream, a pretense utopia that was successfully extended into our common present, but not beyond. Thank you. How much of conversation we have about this, but feel free to ask any questions.
Fantastic, Jilly. Thank you so much. Provocative. I mean, does anybody want to ask a question or comment? Or?
What's like the state of the Olympic setup in Greece at the moment? Like, has there been any kind of sort of like post regeneration around sort of like the sites? Is it still just sort of how it was those images?
Well, there were many sites, and so it depends on which we're talking about. Some of the sites existed before the Olympics, and they were kind of regenerated for the Olympics, and they still have some kind of minor neighborhoodly life, so they're pools with children and things like that. Some other sites are abandoned, some are ready to be demolished. So it depends.
So, sorry, Ramya, go.
I would love to hear more about the context around the project. It sounds like a very ongoing project.
This one?
Yeah. Yes. You
Where we
mentioned. Yeah, exactly. I would love to hear how that came about and how you do it in a way.
You mean my research or the project, the site where we are, the Olympic project?
Well, this is also a question. What is it?
Yes.
What I have understood as a kind of artifact in a way, or a narrative you've created here, and I wonder if that's meant to be an artifact or in a way that you want to expose or articulate or controversialize, or if that's ethnographic material, for example, which is part of a bigger or longer project, and whether this is a project you do on your own or with others. So I guess I'm interested in what kind of project this is.
Yeah. Well, if it was not for this workshop, probably I would come up with this artifact.
Okay.
But in some way, I think this has internalized a lot of my research findings and learnings through the research I started in 2002 and ended in 2016 about the Olympics and the different ways that design is being used, both by Olympic and anti-Olympic movements, and the controversy they generate. So there was some kind of understanding and knowledge I had about this site until 2012, which was the last time I came here. I've been to London later, but I didn't come back to visit the site. So what I saw now, like 10 years later, which may be a good moment to even assess the Olympics or the post-Olympics, is a surprise to me. But before coming here, I had to know what I'm going to talk about. So my only way to learn about the site was doing a kind of a media or social media archaeology and try to re-engage with the discourses and the realities around the site. And already I had established a method in my own research about what kind of voices, what kind of information I would like to know. I would like to hear from those who created the site, but also would like to hear from those who live around the site. And of course there are different groups, different demographics, and different politics around the site. which I wanted to become aware of. Of course, acknowledging the partiality of what I will learn, but also my own partiality, because I have also already kind of a certain, mood or predisposition coming to design based on who I am and what I have learned so far. So I didn't want to ignore that side. I didn't want to claim some objectivity. That's why I tried to insert my own experience and emotions.
Right. Thanks very much. It's very provocative indeed, to the point that sometimes I wonder if what I'm trying to do makes any sense. So I just wanted to kind of provoke back and ask you if there is a role, and what is for you, what has changed so far since you wrote Designing the Olympics? What is then the role of design in this kind of Olympic legacy making, if there is one?
The role of design.
The role of design, yeah, in Olympic legacy making, if there is one.
Whose design, yes, and from whom is one question I would ask as an answer to this question, because when I started this research in 2012, I was looking only at this kind of design coming from those who are commissioned to do the design. The graphic designers who do the logo and the architects who design the stadiums. But then I found that there was a lot of design, of design-related action also in those who question the Olympics and anti-Olympic movement. And this is an expanded notion of design, which we heard a lot about today. Of course, we don't talk only about professional design, and we question also the expertise, and we have a lot of diffusion of design. So the role of design is, it's very it's multi-complex and nuanced. It depends on how do you define it. If I would look at the role of design from the authorities, from those who are responsible for designing the Olympics, I would not see a big difference from then to now. I have followed it a little bit what happened what is happening in Paris. And Paris is a similar area, I think, understand, like East London, and they're regenerating it, and I believe it will have a similar fate, destiny, like this area. And in Tokyo it might have been a little bit different, because there was already a lot of existing design in the city, and they tried to revitalize it from the previous Olympics. So also it was a pandemic period, so it was downplayed a lot. This doesn't mean it was less expensive, but maybe it was a little different. But the future design seemed to be the same colonizing and imperializing as this one or the previous one. I don't see any reconsideration of the narrative.
Yeah, thanks, Jilly. I guess my question really is a bit sort of pre-millennium and post-millennium, really, in respect to how sport is being used as a regeneration and a redevelopment tool, and as a consequence, design is a part of that, if you can put it like that. And what's happening over at Wembley, for example, I think is a sort of interesting comparison here in terms of the rebuild of that stadium, and then the redevelopment of the Wembley Park area as a regeneration and redevelopment project. I just wonder whether you get a sense that this is a early 21st century phenomenon, because when Athens happened, perhaps it may or may not have had several precedents that it could have looked at in the 19th century. Maybe those precedents weren't there, and it kind of makes me wonder whether design as a byproduct of sport is really what's happening here in terms of how city governance is thinking about regenerating and redeveloping particular areas. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that in terms of the pre and post millennia, because I guess this park very much fits into the kind of early 21st century projection of where we might be going when it comes to sort of redeveloping areas through sport and design as a subject.
Yeah. I wonder when it started, this idea of taking an area which is presented rhetorically as a tabula rasa, which is not true, because even here there were things happening, as I also tried to show. So, but I think in Australia in 2000, it was a similar situation where they took an area that was supposed to be a wasteland and was meant to be regenerated. And it might be true that in the previous Olympics, in the 20th century Olympics, there were not many such cases. But I'm not sure if design becomes a byproduct of sports, or if sports is an excuse for doing design. Because for many cities, at least for the Olympics, maybe not for other sports. The Olympics became a vehicle to realize their master plans and the ideas they already had. Definitely Barcelona did that. It's considered to be the golden child of the Olympics, the successful Olympics, despite the grievances of many people who were affected by it. And I suppose the same thing happened here. And Ken Livingstone said this very clearly. I don't care about the Olympics. I care about getting the funding and developing this area of London. So for them, the sports was just a pretext. But maybe it's an interesting perspective to see what would that be if it was the opposite.
Just a really quick question. What happened in Beijing? Is it similar to Greece, or is it more like London? Like what's the difference there?
Yeah, if you look at it from an urban and architectural perspective, you might say that we have the same kind of internal colonizing mission of redeveloping, like this developmentalist impulse, redeveloping areas which are considered to be obsolete or pre-modern or wastelands. So this thing happened there, and many of the traditional Puton areas disappeared because they built these new structures, and they had a huge process of displacement, much bigger than here, where I think almost 1 million people were displaced and moved to new developments, new towns. With this narrative of progress, that these are going to be new modern houses, and people will not have to deal anymore with collective kitchens and bathrooms outside of their house, etc., as it was in the traditional way of living. And the scale was much, much bigger. So if there is any major difference, is the scale. That and the money and the scale of the operation, the movement of people were much bigger than in the other cases.
And have you thought about looking at the communities in the people that have been displaced and what came from that?
You mean here for London?
Or in Beijing?
It would be very interesting, but I don't have so much access to what happened in Beijing. And so Beijing, I observed Beijing, and I went to Beijing just before the Olympics. It was very difficult to penetrate the narrative and to understand what is a presentation and what is the experience of people. So that's why I chose not to have a chapter about the Beijing Olympics in my book, the 2016 book I published. But it was very interesting to observe. Also, it was the first time that there was a very clear kind of opposition to the Olympics that was expressed at the time through the internet. There was not so much of social media, but it was a breakthrough in the opposition in the Olympics being expressed by a variety of stakeholders. But interestingly, most of the stakeholders were not in the country, but they were outside of the country. And there were many questions about human rights, about the role of the position of Tibet in China, and the Olympics were used as a way to question the legitimacy of the regime, and whether this regime in China should be allowed to then host the Olympics with such an honorable, Western construction. So it was used mostly not as an anti-Olympic campaign, but as an anti-China campaign. And that was the first time that there was this controversy. In the next Olympics, though, soon after, it was all turned against the Olympics per se. It was not the matter anymore of being anti-government. So it was a different viewpoint in the position in the future. But there were very interesting moments in the Olympic history, the Beijing Olympics.
Sort of a comment and question. I've noticed that in the way that the Olympics is talked about, there's a particular discourse, the wasteland, and then that being, because it's a wasteland, it is kind of void of anything where it needs regeneration. Or I know when people were moved out, there was this notion of doing it for the public good and national identity. So I was just interested in, and I think you have touched on this, but if there are sort of these counter-narratives that are emerging in other spaces, and if they're being made public enough, or if there is a way that they can start to, because even still I hear, UCL just put on a conference about the Olympics 2 years later, and there was still a lot of that discourse of the wasteland, although some people challenging that. So I was just interested if you had heard counter-narratives of that, and kind of what people were doing with those counter-narratives, or how they were kind of employing them to maybe gain back some autonomy.
Even the current counter narratives in London.
Yes.
That's actually would be my question to all of you who are from here, because you are on this campus, so you might be more aware than I am. So some of these clips I showed are from the very recent publication. So one of the first things I saw when I was at the shopping mall there, as I arrived, was this newspaper. I made photographs that I showed here. So these are published like a week ago. These grievances that we saw are from now. And what gave us opportunity for this to be expressed and get some visibility is that now they celebrated the 10 years from the Olympics. So it is 2022, they happened in 2012, and that was a good moment to actually show that there was, from their perspective of the authorities and the legacy committee, a success. And it is a success because there are no white elephants, because there are people here, because we're here. So we make this being a successful story. Now, it depends on the point of view, the criteria. If you look from the outside, there are many counter-narratives. And some of us heard some of it when we went to the walk yesterday at the Traganou. And it is complex, because some people took advantage of it as well, and they benefited. The land values were increased. Those who had managed to have ownership there, they now make some money. Many others don't, and many more had to be displaced and leave because they were outpriced. So there is some articulation, but you have to look for it. It's not as in your face as the posters we see on the side here.
I had something to bring up in that kind of, it's not a question, but just something. Did you say you went on a walk yesterday around here? Did you see the skate park that they just built?
I didn't go to the whole walk, but those who did, maybe who was here for the whole 3 hours. I stayed for the first hour and I only went to Grove.
Yeah, well, just around the idea of sport, Olympic legacy and design, they recently built a skate park, so super close to here, and it was actually kind of pushed by the Barnet, who are part of UCL, and I guess in sport in skateboarding, kind of academia, you kind of have two camps where there's a very Borden-esque approach where you write this really seminal book, and he's at the Bartlett, and it's about kind of skateboarding, public space, and access to the city, and it's sort of a way in which perhaps marginalised actors gain access and use the city. Whereas there's sort of the other argument that skateboarders are the shock troops of gentrification, which for me, building a skate park in a space like this is very much the latter of that. And I just think it's an interesting side of contention at the moment with kind of skateboarding, the Olympics, as a sport being moved into that, and also the ideas around. There was lots of co-design workshops for this public space, and what publics are using the space around here, and who's going to be ultimately accessing that skate park with a very certain demographic. So just going back to that question earlier, it's an interesting, I'd recommend checking it out.
Yeah, I think so. Is it very near here?
Yeah, I haven't actually been myself, and I'm not sure where exactly it is, but it was built as part of UCL's campus, which I believe is in this building. So it must be
I guess it would be very different if it was made by the local skateboarders themselves who would want to have that site in the neighborhood, and different if it comes again from one more legacy committee or Olympic organization committee or UCL committee. So the who is a very important question to ask here.
Well, even if
what.
Yeah, I think even if you're asking who's skateboarding and who can afford to live around here, and be a skateboarder is it says this.
It's interesting what you said. Skateboarding is now an official Olympic sport. It started just this summer last summer with the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah.
So now it is an official sport. So it's not anymore the street sport that people do only with their own. It become professionalized and there's a lot of technology into it.
Sure, which also is really interesting for design because, say, for 200 meters, you just run around a track and you're very standardized. There's not much, there's only so much maybe design can do in that space, whereas skateboarding is there's no really set amount of, so the design of this Olympic skate park is way more kind of art for design and negotiation, I guess. That's interesting, but also related to the gentrification side.
Thank you very much, Jilly. That was super.